Rams running back Kyren Williams breaks his silence on a possible contract extension with the Rams. How confident is he that a deal gets done? That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Ramley, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Rams, your daily podcast covering your Los Angeles Rams, free and available wherever you get your podcast. Locked On Rams, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're also available over on YouTube, so if you haven't yet, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, hit the like button. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMAC_LA. Covered LA sports for over a decade, 24/7 sports, SI, Bleacher Report, Dodgers Nation. As always, I'm joined by the Rams pre-half and post-game show host for the Rams flagship radio station, ESPN 710 LA. He's entering his 10th season covering your Los Angeles Rams, the People's Champ, Mr. Travis Rogers. You can follow him on X at Travis Rogers. And on today's episode, Aaron Donald talks about life as a retired football player and what he might do next for his next. Again, talk about some tough stretches, go game by game. We'll start with Kyren Williams extension talk. So let's get right into it, Travis. So Kyren Williams was at a charity event, and he talked pretty openly about how much he wants to get an extension done with the Rams. He said, quote, that he's feeling good about it. He said, I know with time it's going to happen. I would love for it to get done so I can take care of my family and the loved ones that helped me get there. I always got trust in God. Whether it happens now or I play out the season, I know it's eventually going to happen. So that is pretty interesting. I mean, those are pretty open comments, and we've heard Les Snead mention that they wanted a long-term partnership with Kyren Williams. It's also interesting that you did draft a running back in Hunter, and you have Blake Corum in the mix as possible options if you don't get a deal done. But it sounds like both sides are pretty confident that they ultimately get a deal done at some point.
Yeah, I think so. If you're placing bets, I think it's more likely that there's a deal that gets done than there isn't. But I've also kind of always looked at it until it's done, it's not done. If there's a chance it cannot get done, there's a chance it cannot get done. And I think he's in a really interesting place. He's a really good player. He's been really good for the Rams the last couple of years, but there are two things with him that are, question marks. I don't know if they are fatal flaws. I don't know if they're anything that would potentially torpedo a deal, but he's had trouble staying on the field. He's had trouble being healthy, which, obviously, to use the old cliche, availability is the best ability. And he has had a little trouble, making his way through an entire season, which, again, not the end of the world. The Rams have been able to navigate their way through it, but that's part one. And part two is he fumbles a little bit. We've seen him put the ball on the ground a couple of times in big situations that have really put the Rams in some tough spots. And here's where it gets, I think, a little bit complicated as well. As good as he is, and he's not great. He's not special. He's not Christian McCaffrey or Saquon Barkley or Derrick Henry or some of these other guys that you make an exception for and you pay, the going rate. He's not Todd Gurley from a couple of years ago. We've seen what the Rams did with Todd Gurley. He is a very good player that you would like to keep, but this has to be a deal that makes sense for both sides, because if he's going to get into a point where he's asking for something above and beyond what a good player gets, if he's looking for something that a great player gets, I think that's when it could get a little complicated, because he's just a hair shy of a great player.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, is that we've seen the Rams go out there and they're willing to spend big and really kind of give blank checks to the special players and bring back guys that they feel like, okay, these are all pro level, perennial Pro Bowl types. But I mean, I think for him, it's just the fact that, you kind of look at where he's at. He was 10th in rushing in DVOA, averaged 1.7 yards per attempt on first contact. There's a lot of stuff that has him as a player that is anywhere from 5 to 10 in certain categories, or some categories that don't love him. I mean, he's ranked 32nd in the NFL with at least 100 carries when it comes to the yards after contact. But I mean, there's certain categories that really like him. And he also accounted for 43% of the Rams' touches during the 2024 season. So he really has been that bell cow back that has taken down most of the snaps from that position. He's also a big-time blocker for Matthew Stafford as well. So, yeah, I think that for the Rams, they don't view him as a Todd Gurley type, but I also think that they do view him as very integral to what they do on offense. It's just the question I would have is, you mentioned it, the injuries, and can you do this with someone else at a cheaper price and use those resources somewhere else, right? So that's kind of the big question. I mean, he's not a guy that gives you explosive runs, but he's very dependable. He's been a massive kind of glue guy for this team that you're not really going to talk about just because he doesn't stretch the field like a massive explosive receiver or a runs like a Gibbs type or something like that, like a Saquon Barkley type. But yeah, I mean, if you were to draft running backs, he would be in that 5 to 10 range in the sport.
Yeah, like I said, I think he's a pretty good player. I think you bring up a good point in that he's somebody that you're comfortable with back there with Matthew Stafford. It's somebody that you're not worried about missing a pass protection assignment. It's somebody that you're pretty comfortable with. I think a big part of this, and you know, if I were Kyren Williams, maybe a reason I'd be a little bit more anxious to get something done now than a little bit later is, what does Blake Corum look like in his second year? Is Blake Corum that guy that you could put out there in his second year and feel good about pass protection, feel good about him picking up the right guy and not letting Matthew Stafford feel unnecessary pressure? Because, you know, carrying the ball, incredibly important. Holding on to the ball, incredibly important. Picking up yards, scoring touchdown, obviously all very important. But one of the things that I think maybe we don't talk about enough is that pass protection, and Williams has been pretty good in it. Corum really didn't play a lot last year. You know, you and I think, you know, the everydayers certainly remember the conversations that we had about, hey, let's take a look at Corum. Let's see what it looks like. Let's see if there's an opportunity for him to make an impact the way that he did at Michigan. We were both, you know, they spent a high draft pick on him. This was not somebody that was kind of a flyer. This was somebody that clearly they had high hopes for, considering where he was picked, and he didn't play a ton. I think he's more likely to play this year than he was last year. And can he give you a 85, 90% of what Kyren Williams gave you at a fraction of the price? Well, that's where the NFL gets super complicated, because if Kyren Williams is expensive and I can get 85% of the production for 25 or 35 or 45% of the cost, then that's a no-brainer. And that's what he's got to figure out. You don't want Blake Corum to get a ton of your reps and have it's like, oh, okay, well, that's certainly not that big of a difference. I think that's why the impetus to get this done is probably a little bit more on the player side than on the team side, because the team does have other options. Yeah,
for sure. You mentioned Corum. I mean, he's pretty much a little less than him as far as the yards after contact at 1.4 yards. And that's where you hope that someone like Tarquez Hunter, running back out of Auburn, who averaged over 4 yards per rush after contact, can help bring that explosive run, gives you the yards after contact that really you haven't gotten from this running game. But I do think that last season he did prove that he can stay healthy for a full season. I think that was kind of the biggest takeaway for him. I mean, they did rest him late in the year because they had already clinched, but still, I mean, the fact that he set that goal to stay healthy and stay on the field for the entire year, you have to feel good about that. For him, had a 1,299 yards and 14 touchdowns. Also had 34 catches for 182 yards and 2 touchdowns. So, yeah, I mean, it really does seem like they do want to get a deal done. And I think the good thing for the Rams is they are in a good spot if they don't, too. I mean, they have proved they can kind of find the running backs. They take a running back essentially every draft in the last 8 years.
Yeah, that's the weird part about that position. We saw the Philadelphia Eagles just go win the Super Bowl in large part because they had Saquon Barkley. We saw what Barkley did to the Rams, both in the regular season and in that divisional playoff game. They, you know, without him, the Eagles are not the Eagles, but those guys are few and far between. The difference between good and great is pretty enormous. And the difference between good and good enough is pretty narrow. And I think that's where the Rams have to figure out what they're going to do with Williams. Like we started with, I think he stays. I think that they give him the extension that he's looking for. But I would not expect this to be a break the bank type of situation. This is everybody's got to use their best judgment here, because they're better off with each other. But if you go big here, this is an easy one to walk away from as far as I can see.
Yeah, I don't think you want to give top 5 running back money to. No. And I think, too, that even though I do think that ultimately a deal gets done, it's just a question of, do you let him play out the last year of his rookie deal and then bring it back after that? And you also have more of an insurance policy now with Blake Corum, with Hunter. So you have the insurance policy that could fill in for him. You got the replacement right away. You have the long-term possibility as well. So you're kind of protected either way. But yeah, I think that it's nice to see both sides are kind of on the same page about wanting to continue it. So let's ball out this season, and then we'll feel better about a deal. But coming up next, we're going to revisit the schedule, talk more, get Travis's thoughts on the schedule, and then also talk about what Aaron Donald is planning on doing for his next chapter. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
The NBA playoffs are in full swing. We're into the conference finals, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, I'll say, and can't-miss moments. So whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never, ever been a better time to get in on the action. And FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and with live betting. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to start and win big. And think about this. How about this? Combining live prop bets mid-game based on how it's actually unfolding. You can kind of trust your eyes. You can do it. You can make bets in-game. You got to read on who's heating up. Why not back it up with a same-game parlay, right? And who says no to $200 in bonus bets if that first just teeny tiny little $5 bet hits? So if you're new to FanDuel, it is the perfect time to sign up, I should say. Head to FanDuel.com, place your bet, $5 bet. First $5 bet wins. You get $200 in bonus bets. $200 in bonus bets. You're not going to do any better than that. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
And welcome back to Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday. Free and available wherever you get your podcast. Locked On Rams, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Okay, Travis, so we got the schedule. We've got the times. We got the primetime games. And I think the first takeaway that I saw when I looked at the schedule is, look, this is a Rams team that's gone off to slow starts the last couple of years, 1-4 last year. And yes, in the first 5 weeks, you do play the Super Bowl defending champions, the Eagles, on the road, but I view it as a favorable schedule and as an opportunity for this team to get off to a good start this year. You got the Texans at home. You go to Tennessee to take on the Titans. They got number 1 overall pick Cam Ward. It'll be his rookie campaign. And then you got the Eagles on the road. Won't be easy at all. Sean McVay is 1-6 against Philly, and that's always going to be a tough matchup. Then you got the Colts at home. Then you got the Niners at home on TNF. But I like those first 5 against the Rams. I'm thinking 3-2. I'm hoping 4-1. I'd take 5-0.
Yeah, I think 4-1 is a real possibility. You know, the Eagles game obviously is the one that kind of jumps out at you. It's on the road. It's against the defending Super Bowl champions. There's a lot going on there that could make that a pretty difficult game. But everything else kind of stacks up really well. You got 3 of your first 5 at home. You've got 3 games against the AFC South, which is never really a juggernaut. I mean, obviously, C.J. Stroud coming into SoFi, that should be an interesting game. They're a pretty good team, but Tennessee, Indianapolis, not really. The Niners, we'll see what that looks like. That's a short week because, like you mentioned, Doug, it's a Thursday night game, but the Rams get it at home, so they get an extra day where the 49ers do not, because they have to have a travel day in there. We'll see what the Niners look like. They've had so many player movement during the offseason, the Brock Purdy extension, all of that stuff. But those first 5 weeks, if we're kind of breaking it into chunks of 5, I think that's a very, very good look. And if you go into Philadelphia, maybe, shock the world, maybe you find a way to slow down Saquon Barkley. Maybe you catch them on a bad day. Maybe you have a great day. Maybe all of the above. Who knows what sort of start you could get off to, because you're right. The Rams have been a slow starting team the last couple of years and have really hit their stride in the second half of the season. It'd be nice to see them put a little bit of money in the bank early so they don't have to kind of have that frenzy going into the last month and a half of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that first match with the Texans, it's always wild for week 1 lines. We know that, and you don't know how that retooled offensive line is going to look for the Texans. But I like the Rams defensive line edge rushers kind of feasting on C.J. Stroud early, coming out of the gates. Jared Verse in year 2, Braden Fisk in year 2, Kobe Turner continuing to emerge, Byron Young. So I like the defense in that one, kind of getting things started while the offense kind of settles into the season. Then, yeah, I mean, Anthony Richardson, he did kind of have a really pretty decent game against the Rams a couple years ago. So that's always a factor. But yeah, I mean, I think the big one I'm looking at is does Sean McVay kind of get out of his struggles against the Eagles? And do they continue to reverse the trend against the 49ers in recent years? And if that's the case, then you can be looking at a Rams team that gets out to a very, very strong start. And that's something that they didn't do last couple of seasons, where they kind of had to dig themselves out of holes towards the second half of the year. And then you kind of look at the next part of that schedule. You got Baltimore. And it's always tough because Lamar Jackson absolutely dominates when he plays the Rams. He just straight up has his career games against the Rams defense. And we saw what happened in 2019 when he knocked them out of the playoffs. We saw last year getting tons and tons of yards and touchdowns and everything that he was doing in the rain. But is it time for the Rams to kind of finally have their day against Lamar Jackson?
I hope so. But again, you know, like you said at the beginning of this, it's so hard to kind of predict what it's going to be like. But just kind of knowing what we know over the last few years, the Ravens are a tough matchup for the Rams. Like you mentioned, the one in the rain, that was one of the best Rams games of the year. They lost it on a punt return. It was just a weird setup the way that one went. But you look at that next chunk of games, that's the one, again, on the road. It's you know, just not set up necessarily as an easy Rams win. And then you got to go to Jacksonville, or I should say to London, to take on Jacksonville in week 7 after that. So that's a game that you probably like. We've seen the Rams go over to London a few times before and play pretty well. Jacksonville, you know, we'll see what they look like, but probably not the scariest team you're going to run into. And then you got the Saints, Niners, and Seahawks after that, and the Saints and Seahawks both at home. And again, that's a good 5-game chunk right there. You got your bye week thrown in there, so maybe you can get a little healthy along the way. That first look at Cooper Kupp coming back to SoFi Stadium in week 11, that should be really interesting. I think those first 10 games to start the season, I think, is really, really interesting for the Rams, because there's a lot of opportunities there. If they could get through there with 6 or 7 wins, I think that is a real possibility and would be a great start, obviously.
Definitely would sign up for that. I do like the subplots in the Jaguars matchup, of course, here in London, but also got James Gladstone, who is of the Les Snead GM tree, and then Liam Cohen, who was fired by the Rams after the 2022 season. He's going to want to get revenge. You like Liam Cohen? Do you like what the Jags are doing? I like the Duval.
The Duval thing from Cohen was weird. I'm excited to see Travis Hunter. I think he's going to be a super fascinating guy to watch. I'm kind of rooting for him. I'll be rooting for him against everybody except the Rams. But look, man, the AFC South and the NFC South is your two non-divisional divisions that you're going to play. You couldn't really ask for a more favorable schedule. They got to be on the road quite a bit. They're traveling a lot this season, but I really like the first 2/3 of their schedule. I really do.
But yeah, I mean, you look at you get the bye week. A great time for a bye. I like the bye this week in week 8, and then you take on the Saints. So I think it's almost, I'm not saying it's a 2-week bye or anything like that, but it's advantageous for a team that has to go to London, that has some tough games in that stretch, to have the bye. And then you got a Saints team that probably is going to be led by Tyler Shuck at that point in a full rebuild, trying to figure some things out. And then you got the 49ers on the road in San Francisco after that.
Yeah, the Saints are one of those games that, again, I think we all understand these come with the caveats of injuries and the NFL is weird and et cetera, et cetera. We all know that stuff. That's a game you need to win for all the reasons that you just laid. It's at home. You're coming off a bye, et cetera, et cetera. That's a game that you feel pretty good about. Niners, division game, as always, but it does feel like you mentioned a second ago, that pendulum has kind of swung back towards the Rams as far as that matchup goes. Cooper Kupp, we talked about. And then, credit to you for calling the Bucs as a primetime game. You're 2 for 2 on your Florida primetime game. So you're on point there. And that, again, it's a home game, which I really like. But Baker Mayfield is a trip, dude, because he's another one. I find myself rooting for him. I won't be rooting for him against the Rams, but he's a really scary guy because he's either going to throw 4 touchdowns or 4 interceptions. There's really no middle ground to that. And you just hope you catch him on one of those days where it's not really going there. But you got, in that next chunk of games, you got the Saints, you got the Bucks, you got the Panthers, all there. That's a nice little run against that AFC South matchups that those three teams are teams that you maybe the Bucks are the best of the bunch there, but I really like that chunk of games there. I think that's a real opportunity for them.
Yeah, it's an interesting stretch because I think that one thing that you kind of look at for the schedule is a lot of the division matchups are after the bye or towards the end of the season. It's kind of when those division matchup gauntlet games kind of present themselves, but we don't know if San Francisco is reopening that championship window or if they're going to follow the path they were on last season where, hey, that championship window wasn't as long as we thought it was going to be. And then Seattle, we don't know what they look like with Sam Darnold and Cooper Kupp. Are they a team that's a playoff contender or are they a team that's kind of towards the bottom of the division? So there are going to be a lot of questions answered early about the division. The Buccaneers are always an interesting team just because, like you said, a lot of variance with Baker Mayfield. You got 4 offensive coordinators there, and that's kind of what happens when you have a defensive coach as your head coach. So he kind of has to deal with that. They did add Ibuka and a lot of offensive playmakers. So I definitely think that the Buccaneers are definitely, I mean, Sunday Night, I really have no idea how I thought that, but like it really, for it to be on Sunday Night Football, I have to admit that actually surprised me. I thought it was going to be a Monday Night Football game, but yeah, I mean, the NBC executives hit me up and I'll do the schedule for you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, that was a great call. You're 2 for 2 on those games. The amount of primetime games they got, the amount isn't a huge surprise. It's the opponents that are particular. So like the Niners, not a huge surprise. That the Seahawks, not a huge surprise. But the Falcons and the Bucks certainly are.
Lions was a travesty though.
Yeah, I get from what I heard with my ear to the ground is that Fox just refused to give it up. That was one of the ones that they held on to and said, nope, we're going to keep this one to ourselves. So that's something that they were really never able to kind of get past.
Makes sense. That's definitely one where, hey, it doesn't matter when it's on, people are going to want to watch. So that's definitely makes a lot of sense. And then, you kind of look at where you're at now in the schedule. You go to Carolina week 13, week 14 at Arizona. You think Arizona improves this year? I mean, Arizona's kind of a team that has played this team tough. I mean, they blew them out last year in week 2. You had the game late in the season where Kellen Witherspoon had to save the day.
Yeah.
Kyler Murray, you get Marvin Harrison Jr. hoping that kind of turns the corner for them.
Yeah, Arizona, like you said, Doug, I think is kind of almost the opposite of the 49ers. I'm not going to say that they're the team that the Rams are going to struggle with, but it does feel like that for most of the Sean McVay era, Arizona was 2 wins on the board. He just kept it moving. You didn't even think twice about it, that they were just going to absolutely pants those guys a couple of times and, just put 2 wins and keep it moving. I don't think that's true anymore. I think the Rams are going to have to play really well to beat them both times. I'm not a huge Kyler Murray fan, but he always seems to have at least one game against the Rams where he just kind of gets into his bag a little bit and gives them a really hard time. So, to get them twice in the span of 5 weeks down the end of the schedule there is kind of interesting. You've got 3 division games out of your last 5, and Detroit is one of your non-division games there. Another one's a Monday nighter against Atlanta, second to last week of the season. So the schedule, the opportunities for the Rams are in the early part and the middle part of the schedule, because the back part's going to be a bit of a slog.
Yeah, I mean, it is pretty tough when you kind of look at it. I mean, Detroit still a contender in the NFC. Then you go to Seattle week 16, week 17, you take on the Falcons on the road.
The Seattle game's on short west. It's a Thursday night. You're home against the Lions, and then you got to go on the road. It's going to be, they're going to try to feed Cooper Kupp like crazy. So that could be a tricky one. And Seattle's always a tough place to play.
I think at that point, I'm not a believer in Seattle this year. I think they'd be out of the playoffs at that point. That's just me personally. So I think that's a game they should win on TNF. Then you got at Atlanta.
You know what else there is too, Doug? Not sorry to cut you off, but they played the Seahawks in week 11 and in week 16. Cooper Kupp may not even be available by the time we get to that point of the season. I really thought that you might see the Seahawks earlier in the year for the simple fact that you hope that he's healthy and able to go up against the Rams and get a chance there. But seeing what we've seen from him the last few years, the injury bug is real. And week 11 and week 16, that's kind of late into the season. So I wouldn't be surprised if they missed him altogether.
Yeah, I mean, what I was saying was that, hey, if you're going to see Cooper Kupp this season, it's probably going to be him on the sidelines with his eyes watery, looking up at a video montage of himself not necessarily playing in a game, but we'll see. I mean, hopefully he's healthy just for himself. But yeah, I look at the schedule. Cardinals, you finish up with the Cardinals. This looks like an 11-6 record for the Rams. I mean, it's kind of an exercise of futility to kind of predict game by game. But I mean, I do think the talent on offense, the defense emerging, it's kind of the big question for me. But I think it's a schedule that is right middle of the pack. It's not a massive gauntlet. I don't think the division is as good as we've seen in the past. And I think that there's a division that they should win. But I mean, 4 primetime games, you'll take that. You'd probably hope to see some flexed in too.
Well, the other thing is, too, I think there are 5 games here that you absolutely have to put into the bank as wins, and that's Tennessee, that's Indy, that's Jacksonville, the Saints, and the Panthers. Those are 5 games that you absolutely have to have. You take your other 12 games and see what happens among them. They're probably going to drop 1 or 2 that you think you should win. You'll probably win 1 or 2 that you think maybe they're going into as the underdog. But those 5 games against those 5 teams I mentioned, Tennessee, Indy, Jacksonville, New Orleans, and Carolina, you need to be 5-0 against those teams.
Got to cash it on those. But coming up next, Aaron Donald's next chapter. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams. And welcome back to Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday. Free and available wherever you get your podcast. Locked On Rams, part of Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Okay, Travis, so the first thing that stands out with Aaron Donald's interview at 93.7 The Fan in Pittsburgh is he said, as far as playing football, I don't miss it. I don't even have the passion or excitement to want to play football. I will always love football, but once you lose the passion, it was time to walk away. He also said that, hey, he might consider acting in his next chapter and things like that. But I mean, I don't care if he's a 10-time Best Actor Oscar winner. The thing that stands out to me is he's not coming back to play for the Rams.
Yeah, I think it was always one of those things that we were more hoping for than we actually thought was a realistic possibility. He obviously has not lost his passion for the weight room. He's still,
exactly, yeah.
He still looks like he's putting in the time there. Acting is kind of interesting. I've never really thought of Aaron Donald as a particularly flamboyant personality, as somebody that's out there, doing that sorts of thing. But who knows? Maybe there's an action hero chapter of his life, because he certainly looks the part. That's for sure.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, if there are roles for him, there are roles for him. I mean, I think Mark Ruffalo has got to be shaking his boots because he's going to come for his role as the Hulk in the Avengers. I mean, that's certainly an area that he could excel in. But yeah, it's good to see he's happy. I mean, I never really believed that he'd be back, after last season, but still, I mean, we can continue to, add some more nails to the coffin as far as his retirement.
If he really wants this conversation to go away once and for all, he's got to put on some weight or get skinnier, or he's got to stop looking like that. Because when you look at him, you're like, oh, dude, that guy could walk into the NFL right now and just absolutely dominate people physically because of the way he looks. Until he looks like somebody that's been out on the golf course drinking, beers all day and sleeping in and not doing the work, we're going to keep asking the question, because he still looks amazing.
My question is, can he pitch? Because the Dodgers clearly could use him out of the bullpen right now. I mean, they absolutely could use him.
I mean, what a sweep to the Angels, and then they turn around and they get clobbered by the Diamondbacks. Diamondbacks are a pretty good team, but I don't know, man. I mean, I'm still not worried about him really all that much, but it's hard to watch day in and day out, watching a team that you thought might win 110, 112, 15 games just go out there and look as bad as they've looked on the mound for the last 2-3 weeks.
Hey, Aaron Donald, he's the answer, I'm telling you. But that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Rams. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMAC_LA. Until next time, whose house? It's Locked On Rams house.